All right, hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Mathelingual. Episode 2, I'm going to delve into something that relates to my first video. So in my last video, we talked about real numbers, rational versus irrational. Now we're going to talk about some properties of real numbers. And as always, this is the textbook I am referencing this topic from, Prentice Hall, Algebra 2. Okay? I have other textbooks, but for now I want to stay in algebra a little because it's a pretty fundamental concept, and I think once you grasp it, you're really going to, okay, like that, okay. Properties of real numbers. First thing, I want to mention a little fun fact about the number 0, okay? So first, I'm going to talk about 0, because that ties into what I'm going to discuss regarding the properties of real numbers. So 0 is what you call an additive identity. So maybe this isn't a phrase you've tossed around very frequently, but it's an interesting one to know nonetheless. So this means when we say it's an additive identity for real numbers, so I should probably add that, for real numbers, not imaginary numbers, for real numbers. Okay, so what that means is that when you add any number A and its opposite, you get 0, the additive inverse. Okay, so let's say A is a variable. It stands for any real number. So let's say 12, okay? When you take 12, you add its opposite, which is negative 12. What do you get? 0. Therefore, 0 is the additive identity for real numbers. And, fun fact, 0 also has no multiplicative inverse, okay? No multiplicative inverse. So what that means, well, multiplicative inverse is just a fancy way of saying reciprocal. You might be a little more familiar with that term. I certainly was. That's why I have this notebook. Key tip of the day, folks, take notes. It seriously helps in a lot of things. Okay, so multiplicative inverse is just another way of saying reciprocal. So in general, if you have a number called A, the reciprocal is going to be 1 over A, right? So like, let's say 2. What is its reciprocal? 1/2, okay? Because when you multiply a number by its reciprocal, those cross out and you get 1, okay? But 0 does not have a multiplicative inverse, because think about it. If we have 0 and you try to take its inverse, okay, let's say, I don't know, 0 over 1, I guess I could say, because 0 itself is a rational number, so I can write it as a quotient of integers, correct? But reciprocal means you have to flip that fraction. And if I flip it, I get 1 over 0. You cannot do division by 0. I mean, realistically, that makes no sense. Like, let's say I had one pair of slippers and I want to divide it into 0 equal groups. That doesn't even make any sense. So therefore, you can't write 0 as a reciprocal, and therefore we say it has no multiplicative inverse. Okay? So I just wanted to get that covered a little because I thought that was a little interesting read. Okay, so get rid of this. Now we move on to the fun part, the properties of real numbers. And there are a few, and they apply for addition and multiplication, so keep them in mind. So first off, we've got the closure property. The closure property says that A plus B, remember these are variables, this is algebra, A and B just represent real numbers, okay? So the closure property says that A plus B is real. So you can take any real numbers, any two real numbers, add them together, you get a real sum, okay? And A times B, multiplication, is also real. So you can multiply any two real numbers, you get a real product, okay? Now, we've got the associative property. The associative property, okay. So the associative property for addition states that when you have the quantity A plus B plus C, and note the use of parentheses here, this is very important. By the order of operations, when you have a quantity that needs to be simplified that is in parentheses, you simplify that parentheses quantity first. Okay, so we say that the quantity A plus B plus C equals A plus the quantity B plus C, because really, you're adding the same three numbers. The order in which you add them is just varying a little bit. So we say this is real, this is true, okay? And similarly, for multiplication, we say that when you have the quantity A times B times C, that is also equal to A times the quantity B times C, okay? This is also, again, real, okay? So that's the associative property right there. So now we move on to the commutative property. Commutative property. All right. So that one's a little easier. A plus B equals B plus A. You can take two numbers, you switch them, you switch the order around, you still get the same sum. So I could take 1 plus 3, it's the same as 3 plus 1, okay? Cool on that? I think that's pretty straightforward. So that is real, or I know I keep writing real, but just think of it, it's true, okay? That's why it's property. And similarly, if you have A times B equals B times A, that is also R-E-A-L, real, okay? All right, and now we've got the identity property. Identity property. So this is slightly different for addition and multiplication, but it still involves the same basic idea. So for addition, A plus 0, because 0 is nothing, is A, okay? Or 0 plus A is A, okay? So remember, this is because 0 is the additive identity, right? But the point is, you just look at this, really. You don't even have to think about that term so much. Just think, 0 is nothing. You add nothing to something, you just have that something, okay? And for multiplication, we have A times 1 equals A, because one group of something is just that something. No less, no more. 1 times A, on the flip side, is also A, okay? So that is the identity property. Now we've got the inverse property. We've got the inverse property, and that says basically what I was just talking about with 0 at the beginning of this video. A plus its opposite, negative A, is 0, the additive identity. And A times 1 over A equals 1, because A cancels out, because you think you can put this on a fraction, they cancel out, right? But this only holds true. Keep this in mind. This only holds true if A does not equal 0, because you cannot divide a fraction. You cannot divide a number by 0, all right? So A cannot be 0 for the inverse property to hold true in terms of multiplication. Now we've got the last one. Distributive property. Distributive property. And that is A times B plus C equals AB plus AC. So you notice for all these other properties, there was some kind of addition version, there was an addition version on the left, there was a multiplication version on the right. This one, it couples both those operations. So A times the quantity B plus C is just the same as multiplying A times B plus A times C, okay? So those are the major properties of real numbers: closure, associative, commutative, identity, inverse, and distributive. Keep them in mind, because when you do complex algebra problems, being able to tap into these fundamental properties is really a game changer, I think. So, till next time, Mathelingual out. Maya Ann out.